Back with you, America. Bill Martinez here, along with Dr. John Zmirak from stream.org. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hey, Bill, doing well, thanks.
I'm going to say happy Easter early to you, my good friend, on this Holy Week that we're going through. I got to tell you, boy, you got a lot of people uh, revved up, rightfully so, last time, regarding the story of the Maccabees, what's going on with the Vatican. And it's not only the Vatican, it's churches across America that are abandoning doctrinal, foundational principles. And
Absolutely. I've got a piece coming out on Good Friday about this, where I talk about a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism on the right, especially in some conservative, like Latin Mass Catholic circles, but in no means
Mhm.
everybody over there. But there is a rise in that, in scapegoating Jewish people, in seeing Jewish conspiracies everywhere. Um, and it's ugly, and it's sort of it seems mysterious at first. But
Mhm.
in my column, I try to explain where it comes from. Um, First of all, our foreign policy over the last 20 years was overly obsessed with controlling the Middle East,
Mhm.
with trying to take over countries, democratize them, transform them in our own image. And some of the people who were involved in crazy projects like the Iraq War said they were doing it to protect the state of Israel. Israel didn't ask for the Iraq War. Israel didn't
Right.
benefit from the Iraq War. But some American zealots thought they were protecting Israel by overthrowing Saddam Hussein's regime and occupying the country and turning it into an American colony. It was crazy. But there are people now who want us to start a war with Iran because they say it's a threat to Israel. Well, that's Israel's business. We're not even in a formal military alliance with Israel. It's not a member of NATO, and it would destroy the Trump administration if he got us
Mhm.
into a war. It would do to the Trump administration what the Iraq War did to the Bush administration. Everything
Right.
would be about the war, and nothing
Exactly.
else would be accomplished. We wouldn't deport any illegal immigrants. We wouldn't overturn DEI. Everything would be focused on the war. So I pray that the cooler heads within the Trump administration do not get us into a war with Iran, whatever people say. But so the fact that some people associated with the Israel lobby have pushed bad policies in the past, you expect there to be some pushback. Okay,
Mhm.
so we're not going to do that kind of crazy stuff anymore. But there's something much darker out there. There's a darkness. You see it in Candace Owen, you see it in Kanye West, you see it in an increasing number of podcasters where they have conspiracy theories blaming Jews for everything and even seeming to side with Hamas. And in my column, which I published, was coming out on Good Friday,
Mhm.
which is a really vexed day for Christian-Jewish relations, I try to explore that. Now, why is Good Friday a tough day for Christians and Jews? Because on that day, we commemorate Jesus's death. And Jesus was murdered by a conspiracy of Roman authorities and some Jewish leaders. And
Right.
those Jewish leaders got some members of the crowd to shout their approval of Jesus' death. Over centuries, Christians have totally misinterpreted this story. Not all Christians, but
Mhm.
periodically some have. Like in Tsarist Russia, every Holy Week, in some places, there would be pogroms where the Christians would attack the Jews to beat them up for what they did to Jesus.
Right.
Can you possibly get the story more backwards? Uh,
Mhm.
in the Passion narrative, all the people present, most of them Jews, are representatives of the entire human race. You and I, as sinners, we
Mhm.
were all there. Every
Right.
time we sin, we are driving a nail into Jesus's hand. It
Exactly.
has absolutely nothing to do with your genetic heritage, with whether you practice Judaism, whether you practice Christianity. We are all sinners, and our sins nailed Jesus to the cross.
Mhm.
And on Palm Sunday at Mass, we play the part of the crowd when they read the gospel, and we
Right.
have to say, "Crucify him, give us Barabbas." That's a relatively recent thing in the Catholic liturgy, and I think that's an improvement. Most things they did to the liturgy in the 60s were bad. This, I think, is an improvement because it
Mhm.
reminds us, you and I, we are the crowd that prefers Barabbas.
Yes.
So a lot of people, but that's a very uncomfortable thing to realize. It's very
Mhm.
uncomfortable to admit your complicity in the suffering of Jesus Christ. It's
Right.
much more comfortable to say, oh, those Jews did it. The Jews killed Jesus to benefit us. What a deal. Now let's go, even though we benefited with eternal salvation, let's go punish the Jews anyway. it's, it's
Yeah.
absolute madness. It's
Yeah.
Satan. It's the devil trying to take the redemption Jesus brought us and turn it on its head.
Mhm.
There are other reasons for it, though. I wrote a piece at the stream a long time ago called the Samson option, where I talk about how so many secularized Jews in the West who don't practice the religion of Judaism in any meaningful way, they have found a substitute religion, progressivism, liberalism,
Mhm.
multiculturalism. To them, Jewish identity consists in pushing for the left, pushing left-wing views, left-wing causes everywhere.
Mhm.
And there are historical reasons for that. In past centuries, conservative regimes often discriminated against Jews, whereas those who protected the Jews were often seen as the more liberal progressive elements. That's no longer true. And that stopped being true with communism. When communism emerged on the scene in Russia, a lot of Jews supported it because the czars had been mistreating them. But the communists quickly persecuted Jews as well.
Right.
Stalin was persecuting Jews. Jews were fleeing the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was helping the enemies of Israel to try to wipe that country out. But that cultural memory that the left is the friend of the Jews and the right is the enemy, it made many Jews just almost, they felt like they were genetically left-wing Democrats. So people react negatively to that, okay? But and the other thing I think that's most going on since World War II, anti-Nazism has replaced Christianity as sort of the civic religion. That's the religion that's in the public square. That we no longer look to God to see what's good and try to pursue that. We look to the Nazis to see what's evil, and we just avoid that.
Yeah.
So any evil that can't fall under the Nazi umbrella, they get away with. So abortion, the same people who will go to the Holocaust Museum and weep, they'll give money to Planned Parenthood,
I know.
which was
Crazy.
a eugenics organization founded by white racists to limit the number of black people,
Right.
among other things.
Yeah.
Um,
And meanwhile, the black leaders are saying nothing.
right. Transgenderism, that the things they're doing to children. And now in Colorado, they're passing a law that if you don't affirm your child's transgender identity, you could lose custody if in
Right.
a divorce case. The affirming parent will get custody because you're an unfit parent. I wrote a piece at the stream. This is a way to start a civil war, is to tell
Mhm.
people that if they practice their religious beliefs, you're going to take away their kids.
Right.
That's what the Nazis did to some people in Poland. They took away their kids to be raised as Aryans. Um, Churches have, the French monarchy used to do that to Protestants, taking away their kids and giving them to be raised as Catholic. That is the
Mhm.
most fundamental attack. But okay, so if the false religion that replaced Christianity after World War II was, well, I don't know what's good, but we know the Nazis are evil, so we're just going to do the opposite. It allows abortion, allows transgenderism, gruesome experiments on kids that are as hideous as anything Mengele did in the concentration camps. They're
Right.
happening at gender affirming surgery all across the country. So if the dominant religion is anti-Nazism and it's false and it's falling apart and it implies open borders and DEI and anti-white racism is okay, radical Islam is okay, Hindu nationalism is okay, anything that wasn't done by the Nazis is okay. And conversely, anything the Nazis did is evil. Anything, even if they fought
Mhm.
cancer, that the Nazis believed in border control, the Nazis believed in law and order, the Nazis believed in large families. So it's just a totally irrational, crazy way to make up a religion, but it was the religion of the West since World War II. Now people are rebelling against that post-Christian concoction that has been the dominant liberalism since World War II. The problem is they're going to the opposite extreme. They've been told for 40 years anything sensible, any common sense, natural law thing you want, that's probably kind of Nazi.
Right.
That's Nazi. That's Nazi. That's Nazi. Deporting illegal immigrants is Nazi. Keep telling people that everything sensible, normal, sane, and non-suicidal is Nazi. And after a while, they're going to start giving Nazism a look. They're going to start saying, well, it seems like the only thing that all the good things are linked to the Nazis. Maybe the Nazis are getting a bad rap. Maybe I should read Holocaust revisionist literature, which pretends they didn't murder the Jews. And so
Right.
the left has created this Frankenstein monster, and now it's roaming around killing people.
Well, this is the thing that you know, what comes to mind here, John, is that when the Jews sided, as you said, I mean, interestingly, 5 days, 6 days before, they are yelling Hosanna as Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and he knows what he's coming into, and they are, with palm branches cheering him into the city, and then 5, 6 days later, they are telling Pilate, "Well, crucify him, and let the consequences of that crucifixion be upon our heads and our children's head." Think about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was a small number of people 2,000 years ago that don't
but
get to speak for everybody, right?
no, no, but I get that. But even going back to Caiaphas, Caiaphas said, "Look, it's better that one man would die for the sake of the nation, as opposed to this nation be demised." And but here it is. I mean, they're just I just paused on that moment of what the Jews there had to say, even though it's a small group. They
Right.
had cast this curse upon them and their nation and for generations, John.
Well, that was used as a pretext by Christians to persecute Jews for hundreds of years. And
Yes.
clearly it's a misapplication
Oh,
of
totally.
of the
Mhm.
gospel.
Right.
What we have to realize is Christ's blood being upon you is a good thing. Christ's
Yes.
blood is what redeems us. And the way I think to always read the history of the Jewish people as a Christian is that they are stand-ins for the entire human race.
Yes, they are.
I
Exactly.
used to joke with my Jewish friend who was a roommate at Yale. I said Jews are only human, except more so. In other words, the Jewish people are like the human race writ large, or in concentrated form, because God shows them as kind of the protagonist, as
Hmm.
like the representative of the entire human race.
Right.
So it was a Jew, Jesus, who was the Redeemer, and his mother Mary was Jewish. The apostles were all Jewish. The sacrifice of the Mass is based on the temple ritual in Jerusalem. The sacrifice of the Mass, especially the traditional Mass, is
Hmm.
closer to the temple ritual in Jerusalem than anything that happens in a synagogue. We
Right.
are a Jewish religion. Christianity is a Jewish religion, and we should be thankful and grateful to the Jewish race for the gift of monotheism and eternal salvation and Western civilization. That doesn't mean we have to embrace the crazy things that left-wing Jews who've
Hmm.
apostatized and abandoned their own tradition, when they grab onto left-wing causes and claim that if we oppose that, we're Nazis, we have to explain, no, actually, you're lying.
Exactly.
You're kind of going
Well,
crazy.
Well, they've abandoned the legitimate, John. You and I have talked about this. They have forsaken the legitimate, which is, you know, we all do that. We're all fallen people,
Yeah.
humanoids, and you're exactly right. I mean, as you were speaking earlier, the refrain from the book of Judges, you start to see things according to your own eyes. And because you let go of these foundational core first principles that come from God that are, the Jews were told, look at in the morning when you wake up, as you're walking on the highway, as you in the evening when you sit down and with your family, you're to talk about these key principles and keep repeating them to yourself and to one another. There was a reason for that. And as you say, rightfully so, the Jewish nation is a classic example of humanity and what happens when you forsake God.
Yeah. I think we're meant to see the Jewish people as a microcosm of the human race.
I like, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And so any Sorry, my dog's kind of going nuts in the background. Um, Anti-Semitism it's so stupid and vulgar, and it's tempting to people because they want scapegoats.
Mhm.
We want to blame these people want to blame Jews for the death of Jesus, so they don't have to realize it was their sins. Jesus
Exactly.
would have been crucified for one sinner, for your
Right.
sins or for mine.
Mhm.
And what we need to do is own that, embrace the guilt, and thank him for purging us of the guilt by
Yes.
his sacrifice on the cross. And the
Yeah.
idea that you would target and mistreat his cousins, the Jewish people today, to punish them for the gift of salvation that came from the Jewish nation. It's so diabolical.
It
You
really
see
is. Well,
Satan's
mhm.
fingerprints all over it.
Well, it's as hypocritical as those Jews that picked up stones that wanted to kill the woman caught in adultery, right?
Right.
And you can almost, you know, see Jesus coming down from the cross and writing in the sand everybody's sin.
Right, right. I've always wondered what he wrote in the sand. Haven't you?
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be fascinating to know?
I think, it was obvious that it was left out for a reason
Yeah, yeah.
because we can only imagine, what would have caused these people that were so, so ready to throw the first stone until Jesus says, "Hey, here." And so you just, I mean,
You
for
know what?
me,
One thing that people don't realize, that was a trap. Okay, that
yes,
under Roman law, the Jews did not have the authority to impose the death penalty.
yes,
But the law of the Old Testament said that you should do the death penalty for adultery. So these people were trying to get Jesus into being the ringleader of violating Roman law so they could turn him into Pilate. That's what
exactly,
that was. It was lawfare. It was
yeah,
like what they did to Donald Trump and Mike Flynn. It was the first example of lawfare, of you trying to use the law to twist it against its purpose and find some federal judge to issue an injunction
right,
to stop
exactly.
the righteous from doing what needed to be done.
Yeah, and they are so crazy. Just like today, here they get together and they're trying to come up with some sort of narrative of why Jesus should be crucified, and so they're making up this stories. Oh, he's going to blow up the temple, and
Yeah.
and oh, he refused to pay taxes to Caesar. That's
And
he
that's why
was.
it's important that Pilate finds him innocent,
Yes,
because Jesus was not a criminal. He was not punished for cause. He was not justly executed. He was an innocent victim, the spotless lamb, the lamb that was slain, whose blood redeems us all. So there are
exactly.
powerful theological reasons for everything that's in the gospel narrative.
Exactly, including the two criminals who were rightfully punished, as one
Right.
said, "Hey, look at he's innocent. We're getting what we deserved. So you need to, dial it back, so to speak, right?"
That's right. That's right. And that's a great affirmation of the justice of capital punishment. The good thief says, we deserve this.
Right.
Jesus doesn't rebuke him and say, "Oh no, Pope Francis will teach in 2,000 years that the death penalty is always illegitimate and inappropriate." No, he didn't say that.
Mhm.
He praised the thief for his faith and promised him heaven. So that
Yes.
is the most powerful scriptural verse in support of the death penalty, is that the good thief on the cross, the first person to go to heaven after Jesus,
Mhm.
the one person
Yeah.
we know is there because Jesus said so, he affirmed the death penalty and Jesus did not correct him.
Exactly. You talk about what the left will do and man according to his own eyes and what they've done to aberrate the concept of compassion. Where does compassion begin and where does it end, John?
It begins with actually a cost to you. Okay, so if you want to be compassionate to refugees, sponsor them, sponsor one, a legal
Mhm.
refugee, and become responsible for his food, his shelter, his education. Do it with your own money. Don't vote like the people in Martha's Vineyard to become a sanctuary city, knowing there will be no immigrants brought to your city. And
Right.
if the
Exactly.
immigrants come, you call the National Guard to have them removed.
Right.
Okay. So it's the Opposite of Martha's Vineyard. There's a certain negative infallibility. Whatever they're doing in Martha's Vineyard, you could pretty much do the opposite and you'll probably be
Right.
getting it right.
Exactly. But compassion is such an overused word, and it's one of those words that are used in today's vernacular to shut down the debate and
Right.
to really shut down a an intellectual conversation where we can arrive at that place of compassion that truly is compassionate and not manipulative.
Yeah, it's a magic spell like diversity. Our diversity is our strength. That has got to be the stupidest slogan I have ever heard. It's
Right.
like cigarettes prevent cancer. That's how false it is. Okay.
Right.
Cigarettes might prevent Alzheimer's because they kill you before you get it.
Exactly.
No nation in history has thought diversity was strength. Why? The same reason your body's immune system doesn't welcome foreign bodies, foreign DNA floating around in it, because it leads to weakness and division. The whole mantra, diversity, equity, inclusion, other magic words like public health, which they use to lock us all in our homes and force an untested vaccine into our arms. Uh, Whenever you see all the nice, respectable people in society, the people who get published in the New Yorker and the New York Times, the people who get platformed by large churches, whenever they all agree about something, you should probably give it a second look. It's not necessarily false, but probably. It's probably false.
Right. And the fact that it's probably false is enough because truth is that black and white. Jesus said it very clearly. He's the truth, the way, and the life. There's no exception. But, you got compassionate sorts that want to rewrite history and rewrite what Jesus and what God himself said. John Zmirak, as always, we appreciate the insight. Look forward to next week. As always, happy Easter, my
Happy
friend. You take
Easter.
care.
God
John
bless.
Zmirak from stream.org.